Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show, and I'm glad that you could join me. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all of you. Any and everyone that is under my voice. I hope you guys had a fantastic Christmas. Wherever you are, whoever you're with, even if you're by yourself, I hope you had a good one. Even if it was just you sitting in a room, looking at a TV, eating a turkey leg dinner, like myself. I hope you still had a good one. I have no issue saying Merry Christmas. I don't understand these people who think saying so is problematic. It's Merry Christmas. If other people can, celebrate their culture, can't see why we can't celebrate ours. And so I will not be the person saying Happy Holiday, or like they say in the UK, where they don't like to say the term Merry Christmas. I still don't get that. No, Merry Christmas to all of you. And I don't say it in a religious context. It's become this kind of cultural thing, I guess, in the way I look at it. Yeah, that's the way I look at it, a cultural issue. I apologize for being late this morning. One of my guests canceled at the last minute. In fact, he canceled a few minutes ago just before coming on to the show. And I've been trying to find other people to replace that guest at 7:15. But you can imagine when somebody cancels at something like 6:58, finding somebody at 7:15 is not the easiest thing in the world. I sent a few requests out. Hopefully, both requests don't come in at the same time. In a perfect world, a Christmas gift would be for at least one to show up. We will see whether God is listening to that request. I am strongly suspicious that that request will be answered, considering it was so close to the time frame. But nevertheless, it's what we do. We do the news. And so whether we get a guest or not, we are going to do the news. And there's right much news taking place. Apparently, Vladimir Putin sent a Merry Christmas gift to Zelensky. And that gift was an attack on all parts of Ukraine, especially Kiev. And in that attack, apparently, they took down the energy system. So you have blackouts all across Ukraine. Apparently, this attack had 184 missiles and drones. Now, Ukraine always say they shoot down all of them or the majority of them. Sometimes Ukraine was like, yeah, we shoot down 50, and Russia only sent 45. In this case, they had to own up to the fact that many of them, most of them, got through because the energy system just went down. Now, they are calling this horrible, indecent. How dare he do this on Christmas? But if you remember, there was this idea of having a Christmas Day truce that Zelensky didn't want. So you don't have to take the truce on Christmas. You can just take the missiles instead, which is what they did. Now, Russia's point of view is we did this because the energy system allows Ukraine to get weapons and materials and troops from point A to point B, and we want to shut down their ability to do that. Another part of that is also, you would imagine, it's war. And the United States, when they go into wars, one of the first things they do is destroy the oil field, shut down the energy system, the grid, all that stuff, because this disrupts communications, transport, etc. And so Russia's doing the same thing. But there is another element to that. The public. The public. Right now, the majority of Ukrainians want the war to stop. In the last Gallup poll, it was over 50% that said, stop. Even if you have to give up territory, stop. I mean, for God's sake, you have people being dragged into vans and sent to the front lines. And to make this even worse, you have the situation of a guy going to get groceries. And as he goes to get groceries, on his way back, holding the grocery bag, is accosted by the press gang, thrown into a van, and taken away. So you can imagine that when this is happening all across Ukraine, and that the public is like, stop, that having blackouts is not going to help that. Being cold, it's not going to help that. Having your government's inability to supply basic resources to keep the lights on is not going to help the morale, especially when the public knows at this point, what everybody else knows here in the West, that they have lost this war. And every person that dies from this point on is another wasted life. Now, I will argue that all of these lives were wasted because it's a war that never needed to take place. And because of the lies and deception that has taken place, especially around the Minsk agreements, I don't quite know how you end this war. I really don't. I mean, is Putin really going to accept the deal similar to Minsk after they lied about the other Minsk agreements? Well, the answer, of course, is going to be no. Is Putin going to accept a frozen conflict when you see what just happened in Syria, where that frozen conflict springs to life at the worst time and takes over the country? Well, no, they're not going to do that. They're not going to allow a situation for Ukraine to stop, rebuild, and then attack again, especially after all the blood and treasure that was invested into this war. So that leads to this question of, well, how do you end this? And I don't really have a good question for that. I mean, in one sense, you could say, well, they're going to take over all of Ukraine, but again, that's going to take forever. And I don't get the sense that they even want to do that. All things being equal, what they want is a neutral Ukraine, kind of like Austria. We want you to be neutral. For God's sake, you're on our border. We can't have you to be used as a tool of people who are trying to take down our country and has openly talked about balkanizing Russia. So, yeah, that's going to be a no. And then the question becomes, okay, well, how do you end it? And how do you end it in a way where new security architecture of Europe is developed, that everybody's security is ensured? That is the question. That is indeed the question. And I don't really have an answer for that question. We also have a plane crash that went down. Now, this plane crash was heading to Russia in Chechnya, and it was flying from Azerbaijan. Now, as it flew from Azerbaijan, we have reports of a, quote, bird strike. At least that's what they initially said, right here. Bird strike. Now, this was not a bird strike. I don't care what they said. This was not a bird strike. Now, this video shows the wing. That doesn't look like a bird to me. That doesn't look like a bird to me. Say what you want. But unless the bird had a gun, had some kind of metal shrapnel, had something that could puncture a wing in this way with many shots on it, then it doesn't look like a bird. Now, there's an investigation that's taking place, and flights going from Azerbaijan, Baku specifically, to Chechnya have been canceled, especially if they're going to be flying over a war zone. The number of people that died in this was significant. So I was trying to look for the actual number right here. So right here, Embraer passenger jet flying from Azerbaijan capital Baku on western shore of Caspian, the city of Grozny in Chechnya in southern Russia, crashed near Akatu in Kazakhstan on Wednesday with 62 passengers and 5 crew on board. 32 out of the 65 or out of the 62 survived. So we have 30 people that survived the crash. No, I'm sorry. 32 people have survived the crash. 30 people were killed in the crash. And again, as I point out, this is not a bird strike. I don't care what they say. It's not a bird strike. That is a tragedy, to put it mildly. All of those people, civilians, just dead. Like I said, there's going to be an investigation into this. The Azerbaijan president was in Moscow at the time, and he's flying back immediately to deal with this. Now, again, that doesn't look like a bird strike with me. I get the sense that one of two things has happened. Plane was shot down, or shrapnel hit the plane and made the plane unable to fly. We don't know which one, but as you can see for yourself on the wing, that does not look like a bird hit that plane unless that bird was carrying a gun. It could be carrying a gun. I'm not saying that's impossible. This wing could, but I'm very skeptical. If anything, I'm more inclined to believe that the Russian air defense fired off, or a Russian Ukrainian missile or drone hit it, or the Russian air defense hit a drone or missile that ends up spewing shrapnel on the plane itself. Again, I could be wrong. An investigation is going to take place. I'm just showing what that wing looks like and what that plane looks like at the end of it. That does not look like a bird. Just saying. There was also the terrorist attack that took place for the Ursula Major, and another attack that took place at a mall in Russia, where basically a drone hit the mall. Now, this was during the time that there was a massive, I guess you can say, drone attack by Ukraine. The overwhelming majority of those drones were taken down, but apparently one got loose and hit one of the planes. I'm sorry, hit one of the malls. Now, again, air defense is not perfect, regardless of how good it is. Perfection, you don't quite get. Syria is on the brink of explosion. There's no other way to put it. There have been massive, and when I say massive, I mean massive protests all across Syria at this point. And some of the pictures are just astonishing. So, in various locations, Homs, Aleppo, one second. There we go. I think it was like 4 or 5 different cities in Syria. People are pissed. People are pissed, to put it mildly. Here's another one. So this one, what they're saying is that all of these groups, Shia or Sunni, Christian, Alawite, have joined in protest. They say even Shias are joining. Because here's the thing. You have a country that was lenient on all of these other religions, meaning they were tolerant. And so you had Christian, Sunni, Shia, Alawite, minority groups living together. No conflict, living together. Now you get a terrorist organization that takes over. But how does that look? How does that work? So you've lived in society for the last 40, 50 years that you could be on the beach in a bikini. Men can walk around with no shirt on. You might have earrings. You dress the way you want to dress. You worship who and how you want to worship. And then that changes overnight, like literally overnight, to now you have one God. You have one religion. And we are not tolerant of anything else. And regardless of what they say is for public consumption abroad. What they do is very different. So you have assassinations taking place, desecrations of holy sites. You have people being killed, in some cases, openly killed. And you have things like Christmas trees being burned. And so it's very clear that from the public's point of view, who's living there, that this is not an open society anymore. This society has effectively been put under Muslim rule. And the public, after being for like half a decade or half a century, being able to worship in the way that they wanted to, you can imagine that's not going to be taken well, even by people of the religious group of the terrorists. And so you have people who are openly pushing back on what they're trying to do in Syria. Not to mention, you have multiple groups in Syria. So HTS is just one group. You have multiple groups with multiple, let's say, identities and things that they want to accomplish. All of these guys have guns. All of these guys are gangs. All of these guys help overthrow the Syrian government. And they're going to have their own wants. And so HTS, who's sitting at the head of this, who declared themselves leaders, are going to have to somehow mesh all of this. And the reality of it is, they may not be able to. I mean, this is just protests in one area. I mean, they have protests all over at this point. Here's another one. I mean, this is just chaos. Here's another one. City of Homs, Jableh, Tartarus, Latakia. There was one in Aleppo. Yeah, this is just chaos. Now, this is the group burning the shrine, the Alawite shrine. Now, if I'm right, this shrine is one of the holy sites that was desecrated. And you hear him screaming, Allah Akbar. I swear I don't get people like this. I just don't. Like, it's not enough for you to do your thing, meaning you worship who you want to worship. If you don't want to worship, fair enough. If you think it's Jesus, God bless you. But instead it's, you must worship this way. If not, I'm going to murder you. It's like, dude, what the fuck? What do you mean? If you don't worship my God, I am going to take your life. I'm going to take your head. And then go through and desecrate all of these sites, take down all of these religious things. And of course, in the West, they say, well, they are pro-democracy terrorists. They are pro-democracy, diversity-friendly terrorists. That's what they are. That's what we put into power. And so the news reports in the US reports it that way. But the moment that you get out of the propaganda of the United States, it becomes very obvious that this is not pro-democracy, pro-diversity-friendly terrorists. They're just terrorists. And they put these terrorists at the head of a government. And they're pretending as if this government is somehow, a democracy. It is not. And the public itself, who's living under that dictatorship or whatever you want to call it, knows it's not, and they're pushing back against it. And look, the West may be turning their eyes away and they may be saying, hey, this is great that we've put these jihadists in charge. Okay, let's see if it keeps together. Because what it looks like is it's about to come apart at the seams. And when I say come apart at the seams, I mean come apart at the seams. The HTS had to send forces all across Syria to pacify those crowds. And understand the reason for those crowds is because they were assassinating various people, some in the open, others have been assassinated behind the scenes. There were various judges, or let's say other people in positions of authority that were of other religious sects that were just found dead, murdered. In other cases, I showed you desecration of that sign. In other cases, they burned down Christmas trees that were kind of national emblems that take place each Christmas. Those were burnt down in multiple locations. And so the public looks at this and it's like, okay, what the F? What the F? So the Christians, the Alawites who were living in that area, who were terrified that this was going to take place, is now dealing with the fact that this is taking place. And all of these groups, again, even if you are a part of the group that is taken over, you still may not be okay with what is taking place in Syria right now. And HTS is doing everything in their power to keep things together. Now, Erdogan in Turkey has proclaimed just ridiculous amounts of support. For one, they've sent back 25,000 Syrians into the country. On top of sending 25,000 Syrians back into the country, Erdogan has pledged all of this money, all of the support, for obvious reasons. It was his jihadists that knocked it over. It was his group that had been attacking Syria for the last 10, 15 years or so. And so for him, this is a triumph. We've overthrown this government. And now we need to solidify the government, because we can't solidify the government. We have a civil war on our border, which is not something he all that much wants, because you're going to have more refugees flying into Turkey. So Turkey is telling the world, hey, we need to get rid of the sanctions. We need to help the government. We need to give them money and investment. We need to rebuild the airports, the roads. We need to rebuild all of this stuff. And we need to create an economy for the people in this country, because what he knows is that the same chaos that happened to Assad will happen again and faster under this government, as they call it. The people are in the same or worse situation than they were under Assad. So Erdogan is trying to ameliorate that now, trying to deal with it now. He's trying to, tamp down on the situation now. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to be hard to do that when terrorists who've taken over are doing this to kids. Look at this. Wait a minute. Look at what they're doing to people there. He's barking like a dog. He said, "You're an Alawite dog who bark like a dog." By the way, they're doing this by gunpoint. Diversity-friendly terrorists. Diversity-friendly terrorists. He's yelling at him, saying, "You're Alawite. You're Alawite. Okay, bark like a dog. Bark like a dog. Basically, bark like the dog that you are." Diversity-friendly terrorists. That's what the West is calling diversity-friendly. Bark like the dog that you are. And the West looks at that and says, "That's democracy. That's democracy, ladies and gentlemen. Democracy-friendly, diversity-friendly terrorists." It's disgusting. Utterly, completely disgusting. These religious maniacs are effectively knocked over a country and is now putting their boot on the throats of any other group in that country that does not fit their religious ideals. And this is the shit that Erdogan had been pushing and pushing for in order to get rid of the government of Assad. And the only thing they say in the West is a dictator is fallen. A dictator is fallen. That's it. Our hands are clean. He's gone. We can now move on to other matters and other fires that we need to set around the world. But what does that mean, though? A dictator has fallen. What did it mean when Saddam Hussein had fell? Did we really get a good result in having ISIS being developed, Al-Qaeda taking over Syria, and for that matter, Iraq? And one of the people that were involved in the killing and beheading of people in Iraq was al-Jilani, the one who they put into power in Syria, where there's a $10 million bounty on his head right now in the US, and another several million pounds for the UK. That is the guy that they're calling a diversity-friendly terrorist. They took his turban off, they put him in a suit, they gave him a shave, and now all of a sudden he's supposed to be a new guy. They even changed his name. But that's the regime that he is running in Syria. Bark like the dog that you are. When Saddam Hussein fell, that was not a benefit, regardless of whatever you thought of Hussein. Same thing with Gaddafi, and I suspect the same thing with Assad. For all of his ills, the reality of it is, you did have a government and a society, and if you didn't necessarily overthrow that government and you had somewhat of a stable situation, you could actually work towards the reforms that you ideally will want to see in that country. I mean, for God's sake, even Russia was pushing Assad for those reforms. You cannot have those reforms when you're under constant threat of terrorists, just like this, that are trying to rape, pillage, and kill, and that we are backing with military equipment, payment, etc. That's not a win. That's not a win. And when Syria explodes and erupts in chaos and killings, my point, I suppose, would be made that much more so. Erdogan is going to do everything in his power to keep it together, though. And he has put troops, forces, I mean, specifically with this notion of going after the Kurds, but also with the idea of stabilizing the government that he fundamentally backs. And some people may even say behind the scenes runs. Turkey's foreign minister has been in Syria. There's the expectation of a large Turkish delegation that's supposed to go to Syria. Also, he wants to normalize relations. And obviously, he wants to do that because these are his people. These are the people that he effectively put there to do what they are doing right now. I don't think he cares all that much. I think he cares about the image, because the image matters in regards to how they deal with the other countries in the West, or for that matter, the relationships that they have. But all things being equal, these are jihadists, and jihadists are going to do what they do. And the shocking part of it would have been if they would have actually been democracy, diversity-friendly terrorists. But of course, they were just terrorists.